Think of the greatest kings in history. The pharaohs of Egypt, mighty emperors, legendary rulers whose names shaped entire civilizations. But here's something most people never stop to ask. If every kingdom had a first king, then who was the very first? And more importantly, how did he become king when there were no kingdoms to rule? Long before crowns, castles, or even cities existed, humans lived in small tribes scattered across vast wilderness. There were no governments, no laws, and no royal families. Every day was a fight to survive. People hunted together, gathered food together, and protected one another from predators and rival groups. Yet despite living side by side, nobody ruled anyone. There was no throne, no crown, and no king. So when danger suddenly appeared, who made the decisions? Who chose where the tribe would hunt? Who settled arguments? And who stood in front when a giant mammoth came charging toward everyone? In moments like these, nobody had time to vote or debate. Someone simply stepped forward. Someone took responsibility while everyone else hesitated. And when the danger was over, the tribe looked at that person differently. Not because he was born into power, but because he had earned their trust. That simple moment may not have looked important at the time, but it could have been the very first step toward one of humanity's greatest inventions, the king. At first, these tribes didn't choose leaders because of bloodlines or royal families. They followed the person who proved they could keep everyone alive. The strongest hunter wasn't always the leader, and the smartest person wasn't always the one people trusted. Real leadership was earned through courage, experience, and good decisions. If someone knew where to find food during a drought, the tribe listened. If someone protected everyone from a dangerous predator, the tribe remembered. And if someone consistently made the right choices when survival was on the line, people naturally began following that person again and again. Without realizing it, humanity had taken its very first step toward organized leadership. No crown had been placed on anyone's head yet, no throne had been built, and no kingdom existed. But something even more important had been born. The idea that one person could guide many. And that simple idea would eventually reshape human civilization forever. As thousands of years passed, something extraordinary began to happen. Humans slowly stopped wandering from place to place and started settling near rivers, where fresh water and fertile land made life much easier. Families grew into villages, villages grew into communities, and for the first time in history, people began farming instead of hunting every single day. Crops had to be planted, harvested, and protected. Food had to be stored for the future. Homes had to be built, and resources had to be shared fairly. But as these settlements became larger, new problems appeared. Arguments over land became more common. Food was sometimes stolen, and neighboring villages often fought over water and fertile fields. The old way of simply following the bravest hunter was no longer enough. These growing communities needed someone who could organize people, settle disputes, protect their land, and make decisions that affected everyone. Then, something happened that changed human history forever. Around 6,000 years ago, in a land between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, people stopped thinking like tribes and started living like civilizations. This place would later become known as Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization. Small villages rapidly grew into bustling cities filled with thousands of people. Farmers harvested more food than ever before. Merchants traded goods across vast distances. Skilled craftsmen built homes and temples, and life became more organized than it had ever been. But with prosperity came a new kind of chaos. Who owned the farmland? Who protected the enormous grain stores that kept the city alive? Who settled disputes when neighbors fought over land, water, or trade? And who would lead the people when rival cities marched toward their gates? The old system of simply following the bravest hunter could no longer keep an entire city running. These growing civilizations needed someone who could make laws, organize workers, command armies, collect resources, and unite thousands of strangers under a single authority. For the first time in history, leadership was no longer just about surviving another day. It was about controlling an entire civilization. And without realizing it, humanity had reached the moment where the first true kings were no longer just possible. They had become inevitable. And then, after thousands of years of change, history finally gives us a name. Not a legend, not a myth, a real man. His name was Enmebaragesi, the ruler of the ancient Sumerian city of Kish. Many historians consider him to be the earliest historically recorded king ever discovered. What makes him so remarkable isn't just that he ruled a city. It's that his name has survived for more than 4,000 years. Long after his kingdom disappeared, long after his palace turned to dust, archaeologists uncovered ancient clay tablets with his name still carved into them. Imagine that for a moment. A man who walked the earth thousands of years ago is still introducing himself to us today through writing left behind by his own civilization. But that only leads to an even bigger question. How did Enmebaragesi become powerful enough for an entire city to recognize him as their king? What made thousands of people willingly accept the authority of a single man? Because the answer to that question didn't just create one king. It created a system that would shape every kingdom, every empire, and every civilization that followed. For thousands of years, Enmebaragesi was completely forgotten. His kingdom vanished, his buildings collapsed, and layer after layer of sand slowly buried the world he once ruled. It seemed as if history had erased him forever. But thousands of years later, archaeologists digging through the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia made an extraordinary discovery. Hidden beneath the earth were fragile clay tablets covered with tiny wedge-shaped symbols known as cuneiform, the oldest known writing system in human history. As experts carefully translated these ancient inscriptions, one name appeared again and again: Enmebaragesi. Suddenly, he was no longer just a figure from legend. He became the earliest king whose existence could be supported by archaeological evidence. For the first time, humanity wasn't simply telling stories about its earliest rulers. We had physical proof that one of them had actually lived. And with that discovery, one forgotten king stepped out of the shadows of history and back into the story of civilization itself.